No nanny lasted with the Millionaire's twins. A 15th maid shouted you, "Don't deserve to be a father. Stay with me till the very end, and let me know where you're watching from, so I can see how far the truth really spreads." Daniel's voice cracked like thunder as he stormed into the room. The sight of Maya on his bed with his children twisted something deep inside him. For a split second, he did not see a gentle teacher who had soothed their nights. He saw a stranger where his late wife used to be, a shadow threatening to replace the only piece of family he had left. His chest burned with panic, with the terror of losing what was already slipping away. His hand rose before his mind could catch up. The slap landed hard across her cheek, the sound splitting the air like glass breaking. Maya staggered back, her head snapping to the side. The mark bloomed red instantly, heat rising under her skin. She did not scream, she did not fight back. Her wide eyes locked on Daniel, not in anger, but in stunned betrayal, as if the man standing before her had shattered something she thought might be safe. She touched her cheek slowly, the same cheek that had moments ago pressed against a child's hair, and the silence that followed was louder than the slap itself. The twins shifted slightly but did not wake. Maya bent down, trembling, and kissed the tops of their heads. She whispered a good night too soft for Daniel to hear, then slipped on her shoes with shaking hands. Her back stayed straight as she walked past him, but the red mark on her face burned like a brand, one the audience could feel as if it had been laid on them too. When the door closed, Daniel was left alone with the echo of his hand, a ghost of violence he could not take back. Only then did he notice the boys still asleep, breathing evenly, calm for the first time in months. The realization clawed at him, tearing through his fury and leaving only shame. His eyes caught the folded note on the nightstand. The words cut sharper than the slap itself. "If you can't stay for them, at least don't push away the ones who will." Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his palms stinging, his heart heavier than ever. Daniel tried to settle the twins that night, but the moment they woke and found Maya gone, the house shook with their cries. Their voices were raw, calling for Miss Maya, the only person who had calmed their storms. He rushed to the kitchen, fumbling with bottles of milk, spilling powder across the counter, his expensive shirt stained with formula. Back in the bedroom, he tried to tell a story, his voice stiff and unfamiliar, but the boys only sobbed harder. One clutched his chest, and the other buried his face in the blanket. The harder Daniel tried, the worse it became, until frustration and panic tangled inside him. Helen stood quietly in the doorway, watching the chaos unfold. Her eyes softened with pity, but carried the weight of years in that house. She finally spoke, her tone low and steady. "Daniel, you can make all the money in the world, but being a father is hard, and it is the one thing you cannot pay someone else to do." Her words cut deeper than the cries of the children. They pierced through his anger and landed straight in the hollow place he had been trying to ignore. The boys finally exhausted themselves, drifting into uneasy sleep. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his hands shaking as he brushed a damp curl from Eli's forehead. For once he did not feel like a man in control of anything. He felt like a stranger in his own home, an intruder in his sons' lives. Later, he wandered into the playroom, where scattered crayons and papers lay across the floor. One drawing caught his eye. Two stick figures stood holding hands under a crooked sun, but the father's space was nothing more than an empty outline. Daniel sank into the small chair, staring at that unfinished shape. For the first time, he saw not what he had built in the world, but what was missing inside his own family. Daniel found her the next afternoon at the community center, a faded brick building buzzing with the laughter of children. Through the open door of an art room, he saw Maya crouched beside a boy, guiding his hand as he painted clumsy blue streaks across the paper. For a moment he froze, struck by how natural she looked there, surrounded by children leaning toward her as if she carried the calm they all craved. When she finally noticed him, her smile faded and the room seemed to grow tense. He stepped forward, his voice rough, the words tumbling out awkwardly. "I was wrong. I judged too fast, and I hurt you. I should never have let my anger speak for me." The apology hung fragile in the air, and Maya studied him with steady eyes. She waited until the boy wandered off before answering. "I am not coming back to be a nanny. If I return, it will be as a partner to your children, not an employee at your command." Daniel's jaw tightened. The businessman in him recoiled, ready to argue, but the father in him remembered the night before. He saw again the twins curled in their beds, sobbing themselves hoarse, their small voices breaking as they cried out for Maya. That memory pressed against him like a weight he could not throw off. He lowered his gaze, voice quieter. "What does that mean?" Maya folded her hands against her apron, her tone firm but calm. "It means family dinners, no exceptions. It means 1 hour every day where you give them your full attention. And it means you ask their opinions before making big choices." For a long moment, Daniel stood still, the conditions circling in his mind. His pride resisted, clinging to control, but the echo of his son's cries pierced through his hesitation. His shoulders sagged, and the fight slipped from him. "All right," he whispered, the words heavy but real. "I will do it." Maya searched his face for pretense, but what she found was something closer to surrender. She picked up her bag, glanced back at the children she had been teaching, then walked toward him. When she stepped past the doorway, there was no triumph in her expression, only quiet resolve. She was not returning as staff, she was coming back as family. The first weekend after Maya returned, the kitchen table filled with markers, sticky notes, and the wide eyes of 2 little boys. Maya suggested they create house rules, and the twins squealed with delight. Daniel sat stiff at first, unsure what to do, until Eli shouted out the first rule: "Always knock." Ethan added another: "No yelling." Soon the paper filled with childlike wisdom, from one bedtime story every night to Sunday pancakes. Daniel found himself laughing, shaking his head at how serious the boys were, about rules that seemed so small, but to them meant safety. Later that morning, he decided to cook for them, something he had not done in years. He cracked eggs awkwardly, shells slipping into the bowl, butter burning in the pan. Maya tried not to interfere, but her smile betrayed her amusement. The twins burst out laughing when he flipped the omelette too high and half landed on the counter. Daniel blushed, then laughed with them, the sound strange and freeing in his own ears. For once, breakfast was not quiet or cold. It was messy, noisy, and alive. That afternoon, Ethan sat on the floor with his crayons, sketching another family picture. Daniel had grown used to seeing his own figure drawn as a blank outline, but this time was different. Ethan carefully added a tall figure beside Maya, coloring in a shirt with bold strokes of blue. He handed the page to his father with a shy smile. Daniel stared at it longer than he meant to, his throat tightening. It was just a crayon drawing, uneven and childlike, but to him it felt like an invitation. It was proof that something broken could begin to mend, not with grand gestures, but with small changes layered day by day. It happened on a Tuesday morning, a fire drill at school that turned into chaos. The alarm screamed through the hallways, and Ethan froze. His small body stiffened, his hands clamped over his ears, his breath ragged. By the time Daniel arrived, summoned in panic, Ethan was crouched in a corner, rocking, his teacher helpless beside him. Daniel knelt, reaching out, but the boy only screamed louder, eyes wide with terror. Then Maya entered, calm and steady, crouching low until her face was level with Ethan's. She whispered, not loud, just steady, repeating his name until his breathing slowed, his fists unclenched. His head dropped against her shoulder. Daniel stood there, powerless, watching his son find peace in someone else's arms. The drive home was silent, Ethan asleep in the back. Daniel's grip on the steering wheel was tight, his throat tighter still. Later, in the quiet of the kitchen, he faced Maya. "I don't understand," he said, his voice breaking. "Why can you reach him, and I cannot?" She wiped her hands on a dish towel, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Because you try to control," she said. "But children don't need perfect. They need presence." The words landed heavy, sinking into the place Helen's warning had already cracked open. That evening, the playroom floor was scattered with Lego. Daniel lingered in the doorway, unsure, until Ethan glanced up from his half-built tower. "Come sit, Daddy," the boy whispered, almost like a test. Daniel's chest tightened as he lowered himself to the floor, his long legs folding awkwardly among tiny bricks. His fingers fumbled, the castle leaning sideways, collapsing more than once. Maya sat nearby, silent but watchful, letting the moment belong to them. When Ethan laughed at the crooked tower, Daniel laughed too, the sound clumsy but real. Later, Ethan tugged a book from the shelf and handed it to his father. "Read it," he said, his voice shy but insistent. Daniel's throat tightened again, but he opened the book and began. His voice stumbled, uneven, but steady enough to keep the boys listening, and when the last page turned, Ethan shifted closer, leaning against his father's chest. For the first time in months, Daniel felt the warmth of his son's trust. His arms wrapped around the boy, hesitant at first, then firm. A tear slipped down his cheek, unseen in the dim light. It was not triumph, but something gentler. It was the first sign that the wall had cracked. Healing had begun, not with control, but with presence. The night came heavy with rain, and Eli's small body burned with fever. Daniel panicked the moment he touched his son's forehead, the heat shocking him. He stumbled for the phone, his voice trembling as he searched for the nearest hospital. His hands shook so badly, he dropped the device, his breath coming fast and shallow. Maya appeared, calm and steady, carrying a cool cloth and a bowl of water. She laid the cloth across Eli's skin, whispering softly until his breathing steadied. Daniel hovered uselessly beside the bed, his eyes darting to the clock, to the door, to his son's flushed face. He wanted to fix it, to throw money at the problem, to buy a solution. Instead, he felt helpless, the weight of fear pressing on his chest. He knelt suddenly, his hands covering his face. His voice broke as the words escaped. "I'm scared, scared of losing someone else." His shoulders shook, his breath ragged, as though admitting the fear tore something open inside him. Maya set the bowl down and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Her voice was low, steady, like a thread, pulling him back from the edge. "You cannot stop pain, Daniel, but you can stay when it comes." Her words sank into him, not as judgment, but as truth. He lifted his eyes to hers, seeing not pity, but compassion that asked nothing in return. Slowly, he lowered his hands and sat beside her, close enough to hear Eli's shallow breaths and feel the boy's warmth. The fever eased as the night wore on. The cool cloth changed again and again. Daniel stayed there, not pacing, not planning, just present. His hand rested on Eli's chest, feeling each rise and fall. For the first time, he understood that fatherhood was not about control or power. It was about being near enough to catch the tears, near enough to steady the storms. And in that dim room, with Maya beside him and his son safe in sleep, Daniel let himself breathe. The living room was quiet until the boys came running in, clutching a piece of folded paper covered in bright colors. They handed it to Maya with wide grins, their small hands smudged with marker. On the front, in uneven letters, were the words, "Welcome home, Miss Maya," with crooked hearts drawn all around. Maya pressed the card to her chest, her eyes glistening as she looked at them. Ethan stood tall, his voice soft but certain. "She is not staff. She is family." The words hung in the air, so pure that Daniel felt his throat tighten. He looked at Maya then, his face lined with a mix of regret and hope. For the first time, he did not see her as someone hired, but as someone who had chosen to stay when it mattered most. His voice was quiet, breaking at the edges. "If you stay, we will rewrite what family means, from the beginning." The room seemed to pause with him, as if even the walls waited for her answer. Maya's eyes softened, but she did not smile right away. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Ethan's forehead before meeting Daniel's gaze. "I will stay," she said gently, "but you must change, not only for your sons, but for yourself." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words settle inside him. When he opened them again, there was no argument, only a nod of surrender. For the first time in years, the house did not feel like a mansion. It felt like a home in the making. The idea began simply. Maya spread newspapers across the dining table and invited a few children from the neighborhood to join Ethan and Eli for an afternoon of painting. Their laughter filled the house, spilling into corners that had once echoed with silence. Daniel watched from the doorway at first, awkward in his own home, until Maya nudged him to pour juice into paper cups. One by one, the children returned, bringing siblings and friends. Soon, Saturdays became art days. The dining room transformed into a small studio, alive with color and noise. Daniel found himself learning things he never imagined. He brewed tea for waiting parents, fumbling at first, but listening as they shared stories about jobs, worries, and the hope they carried for their children. For a man used to boardrooms and deals, sitting across from tired mothers and quiet fathers opened a door he did not know he needed. He realized that people did not want him as a businessman. They wanted him as a neighbor who cared enough to listen. Slowly, the house that had seemed cold, even to him, began to hum with warmth. Maya's touch was everywhere. She taped the children's paintings on one wall, a growing patchwork of colors that spoke of dreams bigger than paper. Some pictures were messy, some tender, all of them honest. Above the collection, she painted 3 simple words in bold strokes. "This is home." The children clapped when the letters dried, pointing proudly at their work, as if the house itself now belonged to them too. Daniel stood in front of that wall one evening, the sound of children's voices still echoing in his ears, and felt a lump rise in his throat. It was no longer about rescuing his sons from grief. It was about building a space where children could laugh without fear, where parents could exhale without shame, and where he could finally step down from the pedestal he had built for himself. Maya walked up beside him, paint still on her hands, and he caught himself smiling. The house was not just changing, it was becoming something larger than them, a place where broken pieces found new life together. For the first time, Daniel believed the words above the wall. "This is home." The gift came on a Sunday afternoon, small hands cupped together as if holding treasure. Ethan and Eli shyly pressed 2 smooth stones into Maya's palm, their surfaces painted gold with shaky letters carved in marker. One read "One for brave," the other said "One for staying." Maya's breath caught as she looked down at them, her fingers trembling around the weight of what the boys were really giving her. She knelt to pull them close, tears spilling freely, while their giggles softened against her neck. Daniel watched from across the room, his chest rising with something he had never known he was capable of. That evening, the family gathered at the table for spaghetti. Sauce smeared across Eli's cheek, Ethan slurped noodles too long, and Maya laughed so hard she nearly dropped her fork. Daniel burned the garlic bread, and instead of frustration, the mistake drew louder laughter. The clatter of forks, the spill of juice, and the rise of voices filled the house like music. For the first time, Daniel realized that perfection had never been the point. The joy lived in the mess, in the sound of children's laughter echoing off walls that once knew only silence. When the plates were cleared and the children wandered off to build castles from couch cushions, Daniel stood behind Maya's chair. His hands were empty, but his eyes were steady. He spoke quietly, almost afraid his voice would break. "We are not perfect, but we are staying. Together." Maya turned to face him, surprise flickering, then understanding. Her answer came in a smile that held more truth than any diamond could. She reached for his hand, and he closed his around hers, the promise sealed without fanfare, only with presence. The story closed beneath the branches of the great oak in the yard, where the boys chased each other in the fading light. Other children from the neighborhood joined, their laughter blending in a chorus. Maya sat on the grass, Daniel beside her, both watching the golden sun dip low. The words painted on the wall inside the house felt alive here too. "This is home." As the sky turned amber, a final truth lingered, quiet but sure. Healing is not about erasing scars. It is about staying long enough for love to grow roots. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Emotional Echoes, the place where true accounts and moving fiction come together to heal, uplift, and remind us of life's deepest values. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep your heart open. Don't forget to subscribe Emotional Echoes for more soul-stirring stories. Thanks for listening,